Awesome. Yeah, thanks Encirca sponsoring for this panel and some of our event today. Thank you, Tom. All right. Fistful, you want to intro the panel? You here?
Well, we got a bunch of handshake or domainer OGs here talking about Handshake. We guys, the community is definitely super thankful to have you guys a part of our community because, without some of your insight, I think Paul Webb was talking about yesterday. He was talking with Tom, giving him a lot of insight about how to navigate the web. But yeah, anything else, Mike?
I think we just let you. I mean, there's some amazing people here, and I think let Jotan take the floor here, moderating. He's great.
Hey, thank you. I'll take it. And what a privilege. Thank you for putting this together, Michael, and great group of folks here, and for your hard work and arranging the things. And I'll go ahead and take it over. So I'm joined by Chad Volkening, Michael Seiger, Tom Barrett, and Ray King. I think, Ray, this is the first kind of opportunity you've had to talk in front of the Handshake crowd, but you're kind of crushing it over at Porkbun. So for those of you who haven't yet had the privilege of meeting Ray King, he's the CEO and founder of Porkbun and Top Level Design. Chad Volkening is with Realty DAO and, a parallel entrepreneur over a course of many years, but I've gotten to know him through the domaining community and the domain investment community. Tom Barrett is many of you familiar as the CEO and founder of Encirca. He is the chairman of the International Trademark Association's blockchain committee and a very highly respected person within the registrar community within ICANN. Michael Seiger is the founder and creator of DN Academy, who brings just a wealth of knowledge and structure to helping educate on the secondary market inside the sort of the classical institutional domain space. And my name's Jonathan Frakes. You're probably already familiar with me, so I won't give too many introductions, but I've been at this for a very long time. Work inside the ICANN space as a registrar guy. Marketplace. I co-founded NamesCon and a variety of other conferences. So amongst this crew, you've got sort of a wealth of knowledge on the institutional domain space, a variety of different successes. And with that said, I want to dive right in because we've got a brief amount of time to kind of talk a little bit about the kind of the marketplace that exists now today. Registries, registrars, registrants. I think we're all very familiar with that in the classical kind of ICANN IANA space. And when you get into looking at how people have interacted with domains and namespace, they're using them for a variety of things, and we'll get into that a little bit. But there are a channel of various players in the marketplace. Ray King is the operator of a number of top-level domains in the ICANN IANA route, such as .wiki, .gay, and then .inc and .tattoo, having recently sold .design to GoDaddy. And then Ray also operates Porkbun. So he brings the information. He brings sort of a wealth of knowledge from the registry and registrar space. Tom Barrett has a wealth of knowledge from the trademark side, blockchain side, and the registrar side. And Mike Seiger can talk a lot, as well as Chad can talk a lot about the registrant experience in the domain investment and having successes in primary and secondary market registrations. And Chad also has a significant footprint in the Handshake community, as well as some successes in blockchain projects such as Realty DAO. So I know I double introduced you, but I'll go ahead and hand over the topic here a little bit to talk about maybe some of the things in looking at how institutional adoption of Handshake. I like to say, how do we operate from a premise of attraction over promotion, and maybe dial back the saccharine sort of level of communication about Handshake, and dive further into how do we pull people in, how do we lure people in, draw. So I'd like to dive in with Ray really quick to talk about when a registry launches and what some of the process is for, in the ICANN space. It costs a certain amount of money to do that. And then when you're launching, there are certain things that you have to do if you want to not only first launch a TLD into the space, but also you want to introduce new products and services, and what that, like an R-step process and things like that.
Sure. Yeah, so ICANN has, since its inception in, I guess, 98 or so, had this mantra of introducing more competition, and to a lot of people, that just meant more extensions beyond ComNet.org, et cetera. And I think up until about 2012, they had dripped and drabbed some extensions out and maybe reached about 22 in total that were global, besides the ones that are for country codes. And then in 2012, they opened it up wider, and they basically said if you can demonstrate that you have the technical capability, the understanding of ICANN policies, intellectual property, and you have the financial backing, then you can submit an application for $185,000 for any additional extension you think would be good. And then if you pass all those tests and nobody else has opted for that same extension, then you get it. So that's how we ended up being the operators for .wiki and .ink. If multiple people apply for the same extension, then you have to work it out. And there's a few ways to work it out, but primarily people either went to a private auction, or if they couldn't agree to that, they went to an ICANN auction. So eventually most of these extensions got sorted out. But it did take a while because it probably take too long to explain here, but there's some exceptions and different ways people can apply. So that was the process. And it was long, but it was great. And I think that brought a lot of, it did bring additional competition and a lot more namespace to the internet, the version just before the one we're talking about now.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that whole thing we could spend 30 minutes on, but really one of the cool things that I found as we get into doing Handshake, when folks get a Handshake TLD, you pretty much like light up after you've made it through your claims period, and you've got your sort of reveal process complete. So you've got a TLD, and then you can do something with it. And there's really, aside from whatever technical constraints there is no nobody you have to get to approve anything. It either works or doesn't work. It's kind of binary. And so one of the things that I thought might be attractive, at least for TLD operators, is that there is no R-step process. You don't have to go get approved by anybody. It either technically functions or it doesn't function. And so it would give you an opportunity to rapidly prototype or test different things rather than having to light that up through some sort of a process of approval to do something non-standard. So right. That's kind of exciting in that sense.
No doubt.
The other thing to say here is there are an abundance of rules and guardrails that we'll talk a little bit about, but I want to make sure we get a chance to get everybody to kind of, I don't know, draw in all the sunlight from all these participants. I feel like it's I want to get everybody up on stage to sing, because we've got all the winners here, right? So I wanted to just dive in on the trademark stuff, which can be kind of challenging, and call attention to that with Tom, because you and I both are spending a lot of time here talking about don't register trademarks knowingly, like don't do that, and what kind of protections are there. the discussion is always around, for a brand, if you're going out and you have to kind of enforce your brand, they'll do a lot of protective sort of advanced registrations, pre-registrations, and there's systems set up for that inside of the ICANN space for trademark clearinghouse. There's dispute mechanism processes, and a lot of times there's a sunrise where brands can come in early and get their names registered if they want to be sort of proactive about protecting them. So how are you finding successes in communicating inside the Brown community about the thing that they've had to deal with the Z-access extending on the various number of TLDs that they have to register their brand in? When you think about, okay, the new TLD program from ICANN brought approximately 1,000 new TLDs. Handshake has 3 million TLDs. Is that like a high pucker factor conversation with folks who want to go out and register, their brand dot whatever, or how are you communicating that to the brands?
Thanks, Jonathan.
Sure.
So I think that the brands aren't, the handshake isn't making any noise right now. It's like a tree falling in the forest. No one's there. And so brand owners are not too concerned about Handshake yet. The most important next step is for Handshake to fully realize what it means to be a decentralized web, right? Namebase is kind of halfway there, to be honest with you, right? They're not truly decentralized second level names. Such as .forever. So I think that the Handshake community needs to focus on truly becoming decentralized. The advantages of Handshake over .eth, over unstoppable domains is going to be pretty crystal clear if they can go to full decentralization. Certainly, gas fees are holding back Ethereum naming service. There's a lot of brands and corporates that would love to adopt the decentralized web if they weren't making an impact on the climate. And so that will need to be fixed, and hopefully it's not an issue with Handshake. And then finally, if you build a decentralized web for consumers, then brands will follow those consumers, just as they followed consumers to social media. We've seen in the U.S. alone, trademark filings for NFTs and metaverse are up 400 times in 2021 compared to the previous year. So they get it. The next obvious step is they need to then figure out what their presence is going to look like in the decentralized web. And I was actually on a panel this morning about it in Phoenix at the McCarthy Institute, and I said, you know what? You're not going to be able to take your web2.com and think you're going to interact with folks on a decentralized web. That's like a business using a Hotmail email address today. People ask, where have you been, right? And so you're going to have to, if you want to interact with your consumers, your customers, your distributors on the decentralized web, trademark owners and brands will need a Web3 presence, separate from their Web2 presence. And so if you get it right for consumers to adopt these digital identities on a Handshake, the brands will follow.
Thank you, Tom. And so I'm going to talk to Chad and then Michael, looking at the time available and seeing we have some questions. Boy, I tell you, we could take a whole half day, the four of us, and talk about this. So I'd like to, try to kind of glean some high-level points that I think people can take away. So Chad, you've done quite a lot of effort in working with creating sort of I don't even know how to do justice to what you've done with Realty DAO and some of what you're building there, but you've really leaned in on the Handshake namespace, and I'd like to hear a little bit about that, understanding that we're going to then talk with Michael a little bit about the conventional, I would say the classical, ComNet domains. So what motivated you and what drew you to the Handshake, and what are some of the things that you're doing with your platform?
Yeah, thanks for having me. What got us kind of involved in Skip Investor was, the investors that were in, and just the concept of an opportunity to go into a true DWeb stack, right? To de-risk off of ICANN, let's put it that way. 26 years I built my life on the .coms, .net, .orgs, but there's also risk to that now. And so that was the only, Handshake was really the only viable DWeb naming stack that we saw out there, really. And you look at the VC. So kind of the name of the topic, right? How do we get more people involved? For me, it's getting the old people involved, gets the new people involved. Meaning, the VCs that were investing in this 5 years ago need to get back involved. The developers that were invested in this early on need to get back involved. Like that, like it's kind of like they launched it and left and said, "Good luck, guys." Like that's how I think we scale is bring those people back in some capacity. And that's going to want, and like the open source developer ecosystem was kind of our mentality too. But without liquidity and opportunity cost, there's opportunity cost over here and liquidity over here. You don't have a need to be on a DWeb stack, naming stack yet. You might in the future, in the near future, but right now that's not top of mind to most people. So this Handshake could be in the right place at the right time when it's needed, maybe in the future. So for us, that's that's how we're trying to figure is how do we get these other people involved that were involved in the early days. And I think with that team and that momentum, we'll get more people kind of piling into the system.
Right on, Chad. And so maybe segueing into this a little bit. So Michael, I mean, bless you for what you've done with DN Academy, to kind of help create structure and really help people understand the opportunities, which are vast inside of the domain name and internet namespace. So you've kind of gotten into the Handshake more and more. What would you say to someone who is investigating the opportunities here and wanting to kind of bring what they understand from the I would call it the classical world of domains into Handshake? What's there? What's the carrot? What would you lure someone?
So thanks for having me. It's great to be a part of this panel. I will say that, just to add to what Chad just provided, I think we need a couple of things to make sure that mainstream users are adopt Handshake. One, we need the phenomenal group of developers that we have here. And I commend the organizers of this conference for highlighting a lot of the developers and what they're working on, because I know myself, I don't visit a lot of the Discord channels throughout the day to see what new projects are being developed and how the technology and use cases are evolving. So it's fantastic because it can spur other opportunities for development. So one, we get the developers involved, and then two, we need the browser adoption. I know there's one browser starting up, I believe this year or next year, that's going to start including native resolutions of HNS domains. I think it's just a matter of paying for access to the browsers if the adoption's not there. So, if that's an opportunity for evaluation in the future. But once we have the use cases, some phenomenal utilities are going to come out of it, and then users are going to want to get onto it. And then when the browsers allow it, then the floodgates are opened up for anybody that has been investing in HNS domain names, for anybody that wants to offer them for sale through the platform that was just talked about. A lot of those opportunities are going to open up. And I would say, in terms of valuing these TLDs, these Handshake top-level domains, it's I play in the space. I watch what's going on with the values of these top-level domains over time, and it's breathtaking to see how quickly the auction prices are rising. And I think that for the most part, those of us that are in this conference, that are investing and are developing in HNS, understand the value. There's a quantifiable set of characteristics that make a top-level domain, valuable or worthless. And, the market pretty much gets it right. Shortness, words, syllable count, character count. numbers, emojis seem to be really hot. They were really hot in the ICANN space about 7 years ago, 5 to 7 years ago as well. It sort of petered out. So it'll be interesting to see if the same thing happens in the handshake space. But for the most part, the same characteristics that we've been using for domain names for the past 30 years is applying to traditional domain names for the past 30 years, is applying to Handshake and Ethereum domains as well.
That's awesome. And you've got kind of a commanding perspective on that, because you're training the next generations, and even I know people who are tenured veterans in the domain name investment space actually go through your course and talk about learning things. So it's really wonderful that you have that perspective on Handshake and you're looking at that. I saw a comment from Richard Kirkendall about the developers in this community, and I definitely want to say that is certainly something that attracted me to this community and the project. I learned about it very early on, even before launch, when I was the executive director of the Domain Name Association. We were looking at all kinds of technologies and the evolution of how the namespace might evolve wherever it might evolve, into technologies like Unstoppable or ENS or Handshake, even things as obscure as QR codes, or now we see what are the y.at emoji domains. The spread of NFTs and other sort of blockchain technology in general, cryptocurrencies, has become very widespread, and so it's drawing people into having attention into what are some technologies that can let us embrace this. But at the same time, we're mired a little bit in how things currently work. So ICANN, has developed and evolved around 25 plus years, and they've brought in things that are very, very core to ensuring there's stability, security, resilience, that things behave in an expected manner, and that brings guardrails, I'll call it, which some say are maybe shackle or handcuff the ability to move forward. But there are some things that I think have become fundamentally important that won't break or cause broken experiences. As I look at the Handshake technologies and some of the development that's here, it starts off by calling itself an experiment. If you look at handshake.org, it says this is an experiment. And I think that's a good, healthy, sort of authentic way to look at this whole project, as being a way to test and evolve. And yet, Ray, you recently with Pork Bun really leaned in and introduced and added the ability to register and manage handshake names. And Tom, you adopted very early in bringing handshake names into the classical conventional registrar space. Folks really want to understand what are the things that are going to attract more registrars. We saw Namecheap recently, leaned in very heavily and even acquired a controlling interest in Namebase. But what were some of the things that attracted you towards this technology and making it available to your customers? I'll start with you, Ray, and then I'll go to you, Tom.
Well, we're in the business of selling domain names, and I think it's, what's happening here is really, really interesting and really cool. We're not the first. I think Namecheap kind of led the way there with the ones that they own and were selling. And I've got an amazing CTO who is like a partner to me, and he was poking around and said, hey, we should give this a try, because I think some of our customers, we think we have a lot of customers that are techie and looking at new ways to do things. We thought that our customer base would appreciate a chance to experiment alongside us. So we said, hey, why don't we just, I know there's a ton of different, millions of names out there, but why don't we pick a few and see what it'll be like to sell them? And I think it's been, so far a pretty fun experiment.
And Tom, how about for Encirca? You were an early adopter.
Yeah, no, and we're supporting 1,400 handshake TLDs today. Those are from Namebase. We're selling them at cost. I apply the same criteria that I would apply on the ICANN side. If you want me to actually promote your TLD beyond simply giving it shelf space, I need to see a commitment from the registry owner that they're trying to build a business, right? And so there's a lot of ICANN TLDs that just went live, did zero branding, zero marketing to their targeting customers, and those, frankly, I didn't market them on the ICANN route. I'm not going to market them on the handshake route if I don't see a commitment there to build a business. I do think that it's going to come. I will briefly want to say, we're supporting 1,400 TLDs. We have gray listed about 20 that I think have high potential for abuse, right? And so, as you know, all the ICANN TLDs are reserved, so .com is reserved. I don't think it helps the handshake cause to see C0M where there's a 0 instead of an O. I don't see how that helps the handshake cause. I don't see how there's some obvious trademark infringements. And so we've gray listed those. We are frankly not interested in carrying TLDs that are intended to confuse or defraud users and consumers. But we're open to obviously investing more. I assume there'll be more back ends, so to speak, besides Namebase, with more with brands and business owners willing to invest in building out their TLD. So we're looking forward to that. I would like to see a community-wide effort to come up with rules on why we might want to gray list or blacklist certain TLDs. Maybe it's a decentralized autonomous organization like ENS, but the community should police itself, should have some self-regulation to avoid certain namespaces that just aren't healthy for the decentralized web.
Yeah, I can see that might be helpful. And I noticed something. There was a question about this, and I think it's something that is kind of helpful to contemplate here. So there's a concept of custody inside the ICANN space that there's, I guess, 10-year agreements with ICANN or whatever period of time you've got between.
Hey, John, I'd be curious to see what Michael and Chad, maybe we can give them a chance to respond to your question as well, because I know we're running out of time.
Sure. So I was told we have another 8 minutes, and then there's a break right after, so we could run a little bit long if people want to stay and kind of ask questions. So Chad, do you want to dive in on this, and then Michael?
What was the specific topic again?
So we were talking about registrar adoption.
Yeah, with blockchain names, right? The registrar, registry. For us, custody, I think I'm going to lean on to the custody, right? So, with Realty., we have to have custody at a certain point, just because if we're trading on an asset we don't own, it's an issue. Until trust or reputation systems can be built in this system. And so, for us, we prefer to give that to somebody else that does that. That's what they do, like Tom or anybody else. So for us, we like to stay off of that and build other applications and kind of hold the keys to our castle right now. With blockchain names, you need to do that. Our problem is when we have all of our names under one wallet, when does the hacking occur, right? The hackers aren't here really because there's a lot of low-hanging fruit elsewhere. And there's not a lot of liquidity again, but when that starts to occur in our industry, the hackers are going to come, the scammers are going to be coming. How do we deal with this with an industry and the community? I think talking about it is an important issue. The registrars we're already starting to see that in the current things, right? Shutting people off. So we talked about decentralization and the other things that we're working on, I think, from a community. But these are communication and topics are really important to move us forward. And registries and registrars are an important infrastructure player. Are they really decentralized? again, then you can build your own node if you really want to. But if they do a good job and they're open, I know Richard Kirkendale's been pretty open on that. I think Tom and those guys are. Then trust those guys with your assets and then work on building value propositions elsewhere. But then again, if you want to have that opportunity, we can manage our own stuff. No questions asked. It's fairly easy now. A lot of infrastructure is getting better to do that. But again, my concern is that putting our eggs in one basket and getting hacked and nobody to cry foul to like you can with ICANN domains, right? So that is the black swan I'm kind of concerned about that could take down our industry really quickly if it all happens one time.
Yeah, I think we're both focused in the same area. What I was suggesting here is, with ICANN, there is a concept of that custody. For lack of a better term, ICANN is the root or the custody of those contracts, and then the registry has an agreement for a term of time, and then the registrar, on behalf of a registrant, will go and provision those names a year at a time. And you cannot register a domain for longer than 10 years on ICANN GTLDs. In the case of these handshake names, the amount of time has not been defined for second level registrations, but typically there's a concept of year-long increments that are the domain units that we use in the ICANN space. And because it's familiar on registrars, registrants will see that as familiar, registrars will see that as familiar, and so that concept is there. But I think it's going to be difficult for a registry and even a registrar if there isn't a concept that there's some sort of custodial lockdown of the TLD itself, that in order to furnish the delivery of service that somebody buys. So if I buy a year's worth of Tom.Barrett and Tom owns .Barrett, and Tom is locked into committing to that full term of whatever the longest duration of those registrations are. And one of the things that I have to explain very frequently in the ICANN space is, in the absence of knowing who owns a TLD or operates a TLD, if you're a registry operator, you probably want to hold the custody. You want to probably have the custodial wallet for whatever of the strings that you're supplying into the registrar channel.
So Jonathan, to your point, I think I'm a believer that third-party custody, meaning if you're not a custody of your own handshake keys or ETH keys, third-party custody is going to be the first place we're going to see regulation, right? It's already happening with cryptocurrency and other types of NFTs. And of course, these domain names are simply NFTs.
Yeah, and I'll contribute one thought on top of that. With the whole concept of ICANN being centralized rules and databases and the whole decentralized web, we're going to figure out these rules. Maybe it'll be a DAO that controls it. We're sort of shifting the burden of oversight, right? Tom now has to review every single TLD that comes in to make sure that, or somebody on his team to review something to determine if it's appropriate or not. Does it match his integrity values of the company or not? Would he be embarrassed if it got on the cover of some, Wall Street Journal or not? And so people, the whole idea of this conversation is mass adoption. How do you get to mass adoption? There need to be rules, right? That's why everybody in the crypto space is saying, let's get some regulation for Bitcoin, because once there's regulation, once we know the rules, then it's probably going to catch fire, right? It's going to, it's bad analogy. It's going to be, uptake. The uptake is going to be much greater. So I think in the decentralized web world as well, especially Handshake, we need some clarity around how things will operate before we get to mass adoption as well.
It's a good point, Michael.
For sure. So one of the questions that came in was, I own Molt TLD and I want registrars in the ICANN space to offer that to their customers. And I can see that one of the opportunities that to monetize your new Handshake investment is, wanting to go and do that. For registrars, they're going to want to know that the custody is locked down on something. There have been, I recall, CentralNIC. This is, 2003, 2004. We're taking registrations under web.com at the third level And then, web.com just got up one day and said, oh, we don't want to do that anymore. And so if you had built a business or branded around something.web.com, you got rug pulled. And, at least they honored the duration of whatever contract that you did. But there is the concept of wanting to build on stable land for somebody who may want to use, at least in the conventional web development process. So how do we make sure that people can have confidence in what they buy? That's going to be a big, important piece of, what will help the institutional interest in adoption.
So, Jonathan, we've already had that happen in Handshake, right? One of the
Hey, guys, sorry to interrupt. We're actually coming up on time for our panel, but a lot of people seem to be really interested in this. We got a lot of engagement, so I'm okay. The next session is a break, and then our next speaker is at 4:25 PST. So we can keep running through this, and then if people want to leave to go take a break before our next session, I just want to let you guys know that that's what's going on. So maybe it would be a good time to take some Q&A as well in the side panel as well.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for that intervention, Fist. And
Ray, John, let me respond real quickly, because this is a very important issue, because we've already seen this happen with one of the name-based staked TLDs, where someone wanted to back out. They had registrations. They wanted us to cancel the registration so they could, I guess, use someone else besides name-based. There needs to be a huge penalty, right? We're selling names on the promise that they're going to have these names forever. And for someone just to decide to cancel those because they want to pursue a different business model or different partner, there needs to be severe financial penalties before you let them get away with that.
Yeah, for sure. And you probably want to be able to know who it is you're dealing with specifically as well. And it's somewhat abstracted right now. So at any case, a registrant is going to put their hand on a throat, and that's going to be the registrar. And the registrar has no further throat to pass along that love upstream. And so, if you're on the hook to provide an obligation to a customer, which we as registrars would be, how do we make sure that there's continuity there? And that's one of the challenges here, is making sure that that's successful. I noticed when Namecheap really leaned in and launched their own strings, those were strings that they themselves held that were not being done through the Gateway IO platform. They did their own on their own platform, which means they can control it end to end and ensure the responsible delivery of that service. So I noticed that they had their own set of strings, and that they were able to do that themselves in that manner. So I did notice there was an entrepreneur, Paul Webb, yesterday in a really good session where he was talking about what he's doing with his platform. And these are names he holds himself, and then he's going to make available. That's something where, if you're working directly with the domain holder, perhaps that's going to be something that they can work with registrants, or maybe have resellers in. So registrars, if you are thinking about second level, they interact with registries through a process called EPP, and there are some contracts and norms in the ICANN space that is as familiar as you can make it for registrars and registrants, so that it matches what they're used to. You're going to have an easier time in bringing those customers on. Just for people who are interested in that. So I'm going through and just reading through the questions. I see a question that was posed to Ray. Is your technically proficient customer base the reason you think Porkbun has done so well selling SLDs, or is there something else that led to what they call the Porkbun effect?
That's a good question. We love our customers, and I think that when we decided to build Porkbun, we wanted to build a registrar that was something we'd want to use. And I think that's the start of it. Everything should be on one drop-down panel, so you don't have to go to 6 different screens to manage your name. If you want your auth code, you press a button, the auth code's there. You don't need to get an email nothing should take 3 steps when in fact you can do it in 2. So that's one thing was, the UI, because your time is valuable. So we want to save you time. Second, pricing is important. So we mark most domains up $1, unless they're really popular. In the case, we may mark them up less than $1. So I think a lot of registrars will just take the wholesale price and double it. So if it's a $20 wholesale name, we charge $21, whereas other registrars might charge somewhere between $21 and $40. So that's obviously a piece of the equation. And we love our brand. I'll just drink from my pork bun mug. And we try and have a lot of fun with it, and we try and do a great job with support. We're expanding our hours now from 8 to 13 hours a day. And, we like to be able to pick the phone up and have a knowledgeable person try and figure out what our customer's trying to do, as opposed to just get off the phone as quickly as possible. So I don't know, that's our strategy, and it seems to work pretty well. And I'm really glad also that, we're able to kind of move in this direction with the decentralized web, because we like the ethos of what's happening here. We were in the wiki space for a long time, and this idea of being, free speech and, having, not being controlled by rules that don't make sense resonates with us.
All right.
That's really helpful.
Guys, thank you so much for your time. It was really fun listening to all you guys talk, hearing from your wealth of knowledge that you have about the domain space. Me and the whole entire Handshake community definitely appreciate it. But we're coming up on time. We're going to take a short little break, and then we're going to go and Luke Burns is going to talk about setting up an HSD node. So it's a little bit more technical, but I hope you guys will stick around so you can help secure the Handshake network. So see you guys in the next one.
Take it easy, guys.
Kinetic is a blockchain crypto investment firm based in Hong Kong and Puerto Rico. Founded in 2016, they were the first fund in Hong Kong and one of the earliest in Asia. With a portfolio of over 220 companies, they were seed investors in such projects as Ethereum, Parity and Polkadot, Solana, FTX, and of course Handshake and Namebase. Founder Johan Chu is an active investor and supporter of the Handshake ecosystem. Over 100,000 domains, co-founder of DWeb Foundation, co-founder of HandyCon, and sponsor of the Handshake House at Miami Hack Week 2022.